Insiders who say King Charles's cancer is incurable and he will likely die with the disease. Despite the 76-year-old returning to official public duties, speculation over his condition is only intensifying.
5 minutes ago, the palace confirmed what millions across Britain had feared.
At any point, you maybe think to yourself, it won't happen to us. We'll be okay. But when it does happen to you, then it takes you into some pretty, not great places.
King Charles's condition has gravely deteriorated. This somber update was issued directly from Sandringham Estate, the King's private retreat in the Norfolk countryside, where a medical team has been providing constant care. The official communique was starkly brief, just 9 solemn words, stating that His Majesty is now under intensive medical supervision. With that, the world seemed to hold its breath. A misty rain began to fall with a lonely rhythm as journalists assembled at the imposing black gates. The only sounds were the distant, frantic clicking of camera shutters, their flashes glinting off the polished estate crest, a symbol that tonight felt heavy with the weight of the news.
Buckingham Palace has said King Charles spent a short period of time in hospital today after experiencing the temporary side effects of his cancer treatment.
This was far more than a standard bulletin. It was a signal of a monarchy poised on the brink of a new era. Insiders at Clarence House report that the King's private study has been cleared of its usual state papers.
The solutions are out there. There is real solutions to these problems.
This was no ordinary administrative note. It was a monarchy poised at a historic crossroads. His personal diary, once packed with engagements, now sits starkly open on the desk. Its final entry bears a simple date. The weight of duty persists, but even for veteran royal observers, the mood has shifted. This time it feels more subdued, more conclusive. And then the whisper emerged. Senior aides confirmed that before his decline, the king personally authorized one final directive, a sealed document held to contain his precise wishes should he become unable to serve. Only 3 individuals are thought to have seen its contents: Princess Anne, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and Prince William. Tonight that letter is secured within Sandringham's private vault. While its full contents are unknown, a single phrase from a palace insider has already sent a tremor through the country. It changes everything. As the nation waits, a solitary question hangs in the air. Is this the closing chapter of King Charles's reign, or the beginning of a new era that the late Queen herself anticipated?
6 years old. He is still undergoing treatment. He's still having that treatment weekly. You mentioned just before I came on about that bump in the road, it was described, when he did have to go back into the hospital just for a few hours. But that was something to do with his treatment. So maybe his treatment was changing. But I think you have to look at the long-term view, which is certainly what the king is doing. And
remain with us, because by the conclusion of this report, you will discover the truth of the events inside Sandringham and how a father's ultimate choice may permanently reshape the monarchy's future. To fully comprehend the gravity of the situation now captivating Britain, we must rewind several months, to a time long before the palace's tragic confirmation today. It started quietly, as such matters often do, with a subtle reordering of the royal diary and a noticeable increase in private time reserved for the king. Charles had always been recognized for his disciplined daily regimen: dawn correspondence, consecutive meetings, walks with his dogs, and evening state boxes. Yet, earlier this year, his schedule began to appear lighter. Initially, this was written off as prudent pacing for a monarch who assumed the throne later in life, ascending at 73 to a role previously occupied by a figure famed for her boundless stamina and reserve. It was logical that his approach would differ, but privately, medical advisors were growing concerned. The king had been participating in a relatively novel treatment, a targeted immunotherapy trial intended to stop the progression of a rare lymphoma, a fact concealed from the public under the pretense of routine health management. The location was Addenbrooke's Hospital in Cambridge, an institution renowned for its advanced cancer treatment. Very few outside the king's most insular circle knew the full scope of his visits there, which often involved discreet helicopter flights in the pre-dawn hours to evade public notice.
Charles spent a short period of time in hospital today after experiencing the temporary side effects of his cancer treatment.
What seemed like peaceful retreats to the countryside were in truth carefully managed medical interventions. At the center of the family, Queen Camilla became the unwavering gatekeeper. Her public persona, supportive, smiling, and present, belied the reality of her fiercely managing palace operations while shielding her husband from political and media pressures. A former courtier noted she controlled all access with hawk-like precision. No one saw the king without her consent, not even William. Prince William during this time began discreetly shouldering more responsibilities. He took the lead on state visits, appeared at an increasing number of public functions, and conducted private audiences with the Prime Minister. His most significant appearance was at the Commonwealth Leadership Forum, an event traditionally reserved for the monarch. The palace framed it as a sharing of duties, but to those on the inside it was evident William wasn't merely filling in, he was stepping up. Yet the most crucial figure operating behind the scenes may have been Princess Anne, revered for her discretion and steadfast loyalty. She acted as the essential bridge between the past and present. It was Anne who accessed the late Queen Elizabeth's private archive at Windsor, a collection seldom disturbed, and retrieved a letter, believed to have been written just before Her Majesty's passing. While its contents remain confidential, one line reportedly underlined in Elizabeth's own hand read, "If duty ever outweighs health, let clarity protect the crown." According to an insider, Anne delivered the letter to Charles in early September. He read it twice, set it aside, and said quietly, "She always knew." From that moment, palace staff observed a change. The king grew more subdued and reflective. He cleared his desk, reduced his calls, and spent hours gazing from the tall windows of Sandringham's north wing, the very room where Queen Elizabeth herself had conducted state business early in her reign. It was then that murmurs of a sealed instruction began to surface. A document handwritten by Charles, detailing his wishes should he become medically incapacitated. Sources indicate it was placed in a cedar-lined box within the private vault beneath Sandringham Chapel. Only 3 individuals know its full contents, and as of this morning, all 3 are gathered in the same room. The pieces are now in position. The crown may not have formally changed hands, but a shift has occurred. The king's voice may be fading, but the resonance of his decisions has never been stronger. The first public hint of serious trouble came not from an official announcement, but from a fleeting moment at a charity reception in early September. King Charles, ever the composed figure, stumbled slightly while greeting an ambassador. His face, usually warm and expressive, appeared gaunt, and his voice was softer than normal. Commentators dismissed it as fatigue, but the aides stationed off-camera knew the truth. The king hadn't slept properly in 3 days. A week later, during a supposed private weekend at Sandringham, vehicles were spotted arriving late at night, including an unmarked medical transport van followed by the royal physician's car. The press was given the standard line, "The king is resting," but inside the estate, rest was the last thing on anyone's mind. Princess Anne was the one to break the silence, not to the media, but to her brother. She found Charles alone in the small reading room, Queen Elizabeth's letter in his lap. Without introduction, she told him, "You can't outweigh the truth." Charles didn't answer immediately. Then he looked up and replied, "It's not the truth I fear, it's what it leaves behind." In that moment, Anne understood her brother wasn't resisting the inevitable. He was trying to protect the family from its impact. By the second week of October, the king had missed 4 consecutive engagements. Prince William, now a daily presence at Sandringham, quietly assumed his duties. The public took note, and journalists began referring to him as the acting sovereign, an unofficial but significant title. Catherine, ever poised, took on ceremonial roles with grace, though observers detected a quiet tension in her demeanor, the kind that comes from preparing for a future one never sought. Then came the call at 3:24 a.m. William's secure line rang. On the other end, a senior advisor uttered 7 words that would alter the course of the monarchy. His Majesty has lost full cognitive clarity. It wasn't death, but it was a devastating approximation. A moment where the king, blurred by medication and exhaustion, reportedly looked at Anne and asked, "Is my mother still waiting for her coronation?" The confusion was heartbreaking, but the implications were constitutional. A monarch who could no longer distinguish past from present was no longer fit to rule. The palace moved with swift precision. Medical documentation was reviewed, lawyers were consulted, and the sealed letter Charles had written months prior was finally opened. Inside, as confirmed by multiple insiders, was a single-page instruction. In the event of cognitive failure, interim authority was to be transferred to the Prince of Wales, with full advisory rights granted to Princess Anne. It wasn't a will, nor was it an abdication. It was something entirely novel, a sovereign choosing to step aside not for death, but for the sake of duty itself. By dawn, the first mechanisms of transition were in motion. Sandringham was placed on lockdown. A royal helicopter was dispatched to Windsor. And Camilla, she was gone. An aide later revealed the Queen had departed quietly during the night for Florence, officially to gather herself. The truth, however, was that she had resisted this moment for weeks, not from a lack of love for Charles, but from a belief that stepping back was a form of surrender. In a way, she wasn't wrong. Across Britain, people woke up to the Telegraph's front page: "The Crown pauses. Prince William assumes interim powers." It wasn't a coronation, there were no trumpets or robes, yet for many, it felt like history tipping forward. And that brings us to you. Yes, you watching this right now. If you were in William's position, would you have opened that letter? Would you accept a burden meant for the final chapter of someone else's life? Let us know in the comments below, and tell us where you're watching from, whether you're in London, Toronto, Manila, Nairobi, or Brisbane. Your perspective is part of this historic moment too. Like this video, if you believe duty can demand profound sacrifice, and subscribe for more real-time updates on the royal transition that is redefining the future of the crown. While the public digested the headline that would define a generation, Prince William assumes interim powers, a far more delicate operation unfolded behind closed doors. The palace now operating under a quiet transition protocol, activated procedures reserved for the most sensitive of scenarios, a living monarch rendered unfit but not yet gone. The term whispered in the corridors wasn't abdication, it was soft succession. Inside Sandringham's north wing, the dynamic had irrevocably shifted. Prince William, once the patient heir awaiting his time, was now the functional head of the monarchy's daily operations. He embraced this role not with fanfare, but with solemn restraint. Often seen in the same navy suit, his tie slackened and eyes shadowed by weariness. An aide described him not as a man seizing power, but as one bearing a burden he was handed. Princess Anne became his principal confidante, their partnership forming what insiders now call the dual regency, unofficial in name but undeniable in practice. The pragmatic Anne managed complex protocol with the Privy Council and the Church, while William worked to steady public confidence. Catherine, in parallel, evolved into the nation's quiet source of solace, her visits to hospitals and veterans evoking memories of Elizabeth II in times of crisis. Behind the scenes, however, tensions simmered. Queen Camilla's departure created more than a void, it exposed a deep division. Multiple sources confirm she had insisted the letter remain sealed, believing Charles could still recover. When it was opened against her wishes, she left. Her communications team fell silent, and her trusted lady-in-waiting resigned discreetly, a move insiders attributed to ethical disagreements. Windsor staff murmured about a thwarted power play, suggesting Camilla had envisioned herself as a potential regent, a proposal allegedly rejected by Anne and Charles earlier. Her absence during the transition confused the public and drew media criticism, making her position within the monarchy seem more peripheral than ever. Then, a second letter emerged, not from Charles but from Queen Elizabeth II. Kept in a sealed envelope within the Windsor archives, it was intended for the precise circumstance of her son being alive but incapable of ruling. Written in her final years, it read in part, "If continuity should falter, let grace prevail. The crown is not kept by holding on, but by knowing when to hand over." Its existence provided moral authority to the king's decision and legitimized the path taken by Anne and William. The Queen's firm, unmistakable handwriting was soon printed across every major front page. Yet, not everyone was comfortable with this new pace. In the quieter corners of the palace, among the old guard courtiers who had served under Queen Elizabeth for decades, there was unease. One anonymously confessed to the Times, "This isn't the way we used to do things. We prepared for a sovereign's death, not their decline." Their training was for a clean, tragic break, not a slow, managed transition. But the British people themselves responded not with resistance, but with a powerful wave of empathy. A flash YouGov poll revealed that over 71% of the public believed William assuming interim authority was the right and respectful choice. They saw a son stepping up for his father, not a prince grasping for power. Meanwhile, inside Sandringham, the human heart of the crisis remained. King Charles, in and out of lucidity, continued to ask his aides for the one thing that seemed to matter most to him: updates on the public's response. In a rare, clear moment, he turned to his physician and voiced his deepest fear, whispering, "Are they angry?" The doctor, offering a profound comfort, replied softly, "No, Your Majesty, they're proud." Then a final, powerful detail emerged, quietly confirmed by the palace late in the day. The imperial state crown, the solid glittering symbol of sovereignty used in coronations, had been moved from its display in the Tower of London to Windsor Castle. Officially, the reason was cleaning and preservation, but unofficially, the symbolism was deafening. The crown wasn't on display for tourists, it wasn't resting on a king's head, it was, quite literally, in waiting, a silent, heavy promise of what was to come, mirroring a nation in a state of pause. As the sun set, painting the wet lawns of Sandringham in gold and orange, Anne and William stood together in the drawing room. No words were exchanged. They simply shared a long, knowing look, a brother and sister who had already weathered the loss of their grandmother and their mother, and were now facing the hardest family decision of all. They weren't just preparing for the future, they were already living it. For all the quiet dignity inside the palace, the outside world was far less restrained. The moment the Times published the phrase "soft succession," the story exploded into a global frenzy. Morning talk shows cleared their schedules. Special reports interrupted programming on the BBC, ITV, and even international networks like CNN. One newspaper headline blared in all caps, "The King still lives, but who rules?" Outside the gates of Buckingham Palace, the usual cheerful tourist chatter was replaced by solemn crowds. People held up homemade signs with messages like "We stand with William" and "Long live the King and the future King," showing their support for the difficult balance the family was trying to strike. But a vocal minority was not supportive. Some, loyal to a more traditionalist image of the monarchy, accused the palace of staging a stealth coup. Online conspiracy forums ignited with wild theories, alleging that Charles was being pushed aside prematurely for political convenience. Then, the situation escalated dramatically. Queen Camilla's voice returned. In an unexpected and stunning move, Camilla issued a personal video message. She was not in the UK, but speaking from a chateau in the French countryside. In the 97-second clip, which aired exclusively on Sky News, her tone was calm, but her words were sharp as steel. "My husband remains the king," she stated firmly. "He has not abdicated. The world should not rush to rewrite what still stands." She never mentioned William or Anne by name, but her target was unmistakable. The clip broke the internet within an hour, with hashtags like "Queen Camilla Speaks" and "Not My Regency" trending worldwide, revealing a deep and public fracture in the royal front. Back at Sandringham, the atmosphere turned from somber to tense. William reportedly watched the video in silence, one aide describing him as visibly shaken but composed. Catherine, however, was less restrained. Her fury was quiet but potent. Upon hearing Camilla's words, she simply muttered, "So be it." For all their meticulous preparation, none of them had expected Camilla to so publicly and powerfully contest the unfolding plan, throwing the family's private struggle into a brutally public civil war. The Crown's communications team was in turmoil, gathered around a polished mahogany table, the air thick with tension and the faint smell of cold coffee. The question hung over them: should they respond to Camilla's video? To stay silent was to risk the narrative spinning out of control. To engage was to drag the family into a public war of words. Some argued for a firm statement from William's office, others, the old hands, advocated for the Queen Elizabeth method, a powerful, deafening silence that suggested such noise was beneath the institution. Before any decision could be made, a quiet miracle occurred. The Archbishop of Canterbury, a man who had counseled Charles through decades of personal and public life, arrived unannounced at Sandringham. He wasn't there in his official robes, but in a simple suit, his face etched with pastoral concern. This was not about ceremony, it was about guidance for a family in crisis. In a private meeting with Charles, William, and Anne, the core of the reigning monarchy, he did something extraordinary. He reportedly opened a sealed letter, a personal directive from the late Queen Elizabeth II, and read excerpts aloud. His voice was calm but firm as he repeated her timeless wisdom. The strength of the crown lies in its restraint. It was a powerful reminder to this fractured family that their power comes not from winning public arguments, but from a united, dignified silence above the fray. Afterward, the Archbishop stood beside William before a small group of reporters. He didn't deliver a long speech. He looked directly into the cameras and said simply, "The King has entrusted his son. Let us not question the love that binds them." Those few words were a masterstroke. They reframed the entire debate from one of power and succession to one of family and love. The public sentiment, which had been wavering, swung firmly back in William's favor. Commentators praised the measured transition, and polls showed a surge of support. Yet the division was real and painful. Among the aristocracy, the old guard felt a profound sense of dislocation. Lady Rosamond Devereux, a fixture in royal circles, voiced their grief. "We were not raised to see our monarchs fade away. We were raised to bury them with crowns intact." For them, this managed transition felt like a betrayal of centuries of tradition. But to a younger generation, it was a sign of hope. On TikTok and Instagram, thousands of creators shared videos celebrating the monarchy's surprising ability to modernize with dignity. A decades-old clip of a young Prince William confiding to his mother, Diana, "I don't want to be king now," went viral. The caption captured the public mood perfectly. He didn't want to, but he rose anyway. It painted William not as an ambitious usurper, but as a reluctant, dutiful son. Back inside Sandringham, the weight of the world seeped through the ancient stone walls. Princess Anne, the family's rock, stayed close to her brother, Charles. In a rare window of lucidity that evening, Charles asked to speak with William alone. No aides, no secretaries, no recording devices, just a father and his son. What was said in that room remains one of history's great secrets. But when William emerged, he was a changed man. He walked the sprawling grounds alone, his shoulders heavy, not just with future responsibility, but with the weight of a father's final blessing and fears. When a worried aide approached and asked if he was all right, William stared into the distance, his voice thick with emotion, and replied, "It's his legacy. I just hope I'm worthy of carrying it." Later that night, Charles made one final symbolic request. He asked that the imperial state crown, the very one moved to Windsor, be brought to Sandringham. But he gave a specific instruction. It was not to be worn. Instead, he asked for it to be placed in the estate's quiet chapel, resting on a velvet cushion beneath the same stained glass window that had once bathed his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, in colorful morning light. This was his last act of reverence. The crown was not on his head, nor was it locked away in a tower. It was placed in a house of God, a silent, glittering symbol of the institution he had served his entire life, and was now gently, consciously releasing to his son. He wasn't surrendering power out of weakness, he was gifting continuity out of strength and love. In doing so, he passed on something more enduring than a crown: clarity. By the following morning, it was clear the monarchy had entered uncharted territory. This was not a transition marked by a coronation's joy or a funeral's grief. It was, as one commentator wisely put it, a moment suspended between endings and beginnings. The British press, often a ferocious beast, adopted a surprisingly respectful tone. The Guardian called it a quiet revolution in succession. The Times published a two-page spread titled, "The Regency We Were Never Told About But Always Feared." Even the tabloids like The Sun opted for sobriety, their front page stating simply, "He's still our king." And at the heart of this national recalibration stood Prince William, not yet a king, but no longer merely an heir. His first address as the acting sovereign was brief, filmed in Sandringham's cozy study with Catherine, a pillar of silent strength seated just off camera. His tone was steady, his words carefully chosen, embodying the restraint his grandmother had championed and the love his father had entrusted to him. "My father remains our sovereign, our strength, and our moral compass. I act now, not in place of his will, but because of it." William's voice was steady, but those watching closely could see the slight tremble in his hand as it rested on the desk. He was not reading from a cold official statement, he was speaking from the heart. He thanked the public for their understanding, his words carrying the weight of a nation's shared concern. He thanked the medical team for their care, acknowledging the army of professionals working behind the scenes. Then he did something that broke from royal protocol and connected with every person listening. He leaned slightly forward as if confiding in the nation, and spoke not just as a prince but as a son. "For every son who watches a father grow old before his time," he said, his voice softening with a palpable personal ache, "I stand with you. For every family navigating grief in the gray space between hope and farewell, we walk together." This simple, powerful expression of a universal experience resonated deeply. It wasn't about thrones and succession, it was about love and mortality. Social media, so often an arena of criticism, flooded with supportive messages. Parents shared photos of their own aging fathers. People recounted stories of caring for loved ones during long illnesses. The hashtag #The Gray Space trended globally, turning a personal royal moment into a shared human one. Commonwealth leaders voiced their solidarity, their statements now tinged with a new respect. The Prime Ministers of Canada, Australia, and New Zealand released joint remarks, praising the dignity and clarity of the transition, but the impact went far beyond political halls. Church leaders sermonized about the humility of service, academics held seminars on the evolution of constitutional monarchy, youth organizations, often skeptical of ancient institutions, pointed to the monarchy as a surprising example of generational leadership done right. One editorial captured the sentiment, "This is what it means to lead with both strength and vulnerability." Queen Camilla notably remained silent. After her initial fiery video, no further messages were released. Her press team became a wall of no comment. A source close to the palace revealed she was at Ray Mill House, her private Wiltshire residence, surrounded by a tight circle of lifelong friends and her sister. She was in a state of deep reflection, walking the gardens and processing the rapid, unstoppable flow of events. Her initial defense of her husband had come from a place of love and protection, but the unified front of the family and the Archbishop's message had made the path forward undeniably clear. Princess Anne, now elevated in public esteem to near iconic levels, became the silent engine of the transition. She refused every request for a televised interview, her silence more powerful than any soundbite. Instead, her actions spoke volumes. She was seen meeting quietly with clergy, not for ceremony, but for counsel. She reviewed stacks of protocol documents, her famous red boxes now filled with the mechanics of transferring authority. She worked tirelessly, with the precision of a general and the heart of a sibling, to ensure the ground was stable for her brother and nephew. And as for King Charles, his health remained fragile but stable. The red dispatch boxes, once the daily rhythm of his life, no longer came. He no longer signed documents, attended briefings, or reviewed the nuances of foreign policy. The machinery of state had gently, respectfully disengaged from him. But he did one thing daily. He read letters, not state papers but letters from citizens. Aides would bring him a carefully selected bundle from school children who drew him pictures of crowns, from veterans who saluted his service, from ordinary people who thanked him not for being a king, but for showing them how to leave a great responsibility with grace. A particularly moving letter, reportedly from a 12-year-old in Manchester, read, "Dear King Charles, I know you're tired. Thank you for showing that even kings can be human. That makes you stronger to me." It was in this simple sentence that his final act of service was understood. And in a quiet corner of the royal chapel where the imperial state crown now sat, encased in protective glass and bathed in the soft-colored light of the stained glass window, a quiet pilgrimage began. Tourists and citizens alike gathered. They didn't cheer or take selfies. Some prayed, others cried quietly, touched by the profound symbolism. Most simply stood in silence, as if in communion with history being rewritten in real time, not with a bang, but with a gentle human sigh of understanding. The crown was there, visible to all, a symbol of power that was no longer on a head, but held in trust, waiting for the next chapter to begin. It was in this quiet space, not a grand throne room, not a historic battlefield, that a 1,000-year-old monarchy quietly reinvented itself. The transformation happened not through a display of power, but through a profound act of tenderness, a father's love for his son, a son's duty to his father, and a family's collective care for the institution they serve. As the sun dipped behind the Norfolk horizon, casting long golden shadows across the manicured lawns of Sandringham, a deep stillness settled over the estate. This was not the heavy silence of mourning, nor was it the anxious noise that precedes a coronation. It was something rarer and more meaningful. The hush of a legacy passed with intention, not tragedy. It was the sound of a page turning, carefully and respectfully. In the chapel, the imperial state crown sat under its protective glass, its jewels catching the last of the evening light. It was unclaimed and untouched, a powerful void at the center of the storm. But this was not a symbol of vacancy or weakness. It was a symbol of reverence. It represented a sacred trust, a responsibility that was being honored by being temporarily set aside. William had not yet taken the throne, but he had willingly, solemnly, taken the weight. He was carrying the burden of the crown so his father would not have to, offering the world a rare lesson that true leadership is not always about grasping power, but about knowing when to carry it for someone else. This quiet transition, one without fanfare, without funeral bells, without grand proclamations, became a living, breathing tribute to the very values King Charles had long preached: restraint, duty, and stewardship. Just as he spent decades reminding the world to tread lightly upon the earth, to protect it for future generations, he now demonstrated how to tread gently through history. He showed that an ending can be a form of preservation, and that letting go can be the ultimate act of care. There is a lesson here for every generation, in every walk of life, that dignity does not require dominance, that a legacy is not built solely by how long we lead, but by how wisely we let go. In our modern era, an age of clinging to relevance, of constant noise, of refusing to step back, King Charles did the opposite. He stepped aside with grace, with courage, and with a deep abiding love for the institution he served his entire life. And so now, as Britain collectively exhales, we are left with a powerful new image, a crown that rests not on a head, but in the hands of a son. It is waiting, the future is both uncertain and full of promise. And now we turn to you, wherever you are watching this from. What do you truly believe this moment means? Is this a definitive turning point for one of the world's oldest institutions, a new model for modern leadership that balances humanity with duty? Or is it simply the quiet before a new reign begins, a temporary pause before the traditional pomp and ceremony resume? Tell us what you think. We'd love to know not just your thoughts but where you're connecting with this story from. Share the name of your country or city in the comments below. Are you watching from Toronto, Nairobi, Sydney? Let's see how this unique story of duty, legacy, and change is resonating across the globe. If you found value in this journey, if this reflection on power and tenderness moved you, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell for notifications. Stay with us for the next chapter in this unfolding royal story. Because history isn't just written in coronations and battles, sometimes it's whispered through the walls of Sandringham, in the quiet space between a king's sacrifice and a prince's promise.